The story begins in Seoul, where there has been a serious spike in drug-related crimes. Because of this, Officer Jae Kyung leads an investigation into notorious drug dealers called the Five Spider Gang and begins to take down their members one by one. One night, they track down their leader, Chul-gu, to a small restaurant and wait for the perfect time to apprehend him. Inside the restaurant, Yoo-jin, an ambitious reporter, meets with a businessman who asks her to pull a story she submitted on his company. When she refuses, the man reveals shady pictures of her benefiting from others, and he was. He also shows he's been recording their conversation and threatens to take it to a news desk or the police if she doesn't cooperate. After he leaves, Chul-gu notices Jae Kyung watching him and figures the police are onto him, so he takes off. Jae Kyung chases him to a rooftop where he manages to take him down. Chul-gu surrenders, but Jae Kyung remembers how Chul-gu had previously injured the leg of one of his men. Jae Kyung fires his gun at Chul-gu's leg just as his subordinate, Chang-soo, arrives on the roof. A month later, Jae Kyung is investigated for possible misuse of his firearm, but Jae Kyung claims that he shot his gun to stop Chul-gu. After this, Jae Kyung gets promoted to the rank of inspector at a police ceremony. The unit chief, Yeon-ju, congratulates him and suggests they go out to celebrate later. The chief of police walks over and congratulates the whole narcotics unit. Then they take a picture to mark the occasion. Later, Jae Kyung returns to his home where he can finally take down all the details from the Five Spider Gang case. He then relaxes to some music and quiet time at home. That evening, he gets a visit from his old friend Jun-soo, but he's not happy to see him. Jae Kyung asks what he wants, so Jun-soo apologizes for what he did 20 years ago, but Jae Kyung refuses to forgive him. Disappointed, Jun-soo decided to leave, promising to put everything back in order this time. At this, Jae Kyung thinks back to 20 years ago when he had filed a police report about a crime. Jae Kyung referred to Jun-soo as the only witness, but when the police asked if it was true, Jun-soo denied seeing anything. Back in the present, Yoo-jin was leaving her apartment building when a lady rushed past her, causing her phone to break. When Yoo-jin tried to hold her responsible, she caught her swallowing drugs and starting to choke. Suddenly, the woman's daughter showed up, so the woman ran into the street where she was hit by a truck and killed. Later, the police questioned Yoo-jin about the incident, and she realized they had no idea what drug the woman took. As Jae Kyung watched, he was handed a packet of the new drugs, so he warned his colleague to watch what she says around Yoo-jin, who could write a story on it. That night, Jae Kyung went to a restaurant to eat and drink with the rest of his team. When they were done celebrating, Jae Kyung split up from the others to use the bathroom. On his way, he received a text message from a strange number describing a spot at the subway station. The message read from Doctor and included numbers 1882. Jae Kyung instantly recognized the numbers as the SOS numbers he had with Jun-soo. He tried calling the strange number, Jun-soo's number, that went straight to voicemail. Suddenly, he was bagged from behind, and the next 3 days were a series of blurry images. When he woke up, he was at the subway station with Chang-soo, confused and disoriented. Chang-soo showed him the text he had received to come to that spot at the station, so they hopped on the train and looked for someone suspicious. There, Jae Kyung watched a woman with a white bag get off and hand the bag to a man in a cap. Jae Kyung and Chang-soo split up, and Jae Kyung goes after the man in the cap. However, he struggles to keep up as he experiences chest pains and dizziness. He takes a shortcut and catches the man in the back of an old lady's house. The men fight it out, but Jae Kyung gets knocked out, allowing the man to steal his gun. When he comes to, Jae Kyung heads to a convenience store to get some water to clear his head. When he tries to pay, he finds a drug in his jacket and remembers it's just like the ones that woman was caught using. Jae Kyung immediately gets in a taxi to the station when he receives a video of himself doing drugs. This makes him sick to his stomach, so he exits the taxi to vomit. Meanwhile, some workers at a construction site discover a man's dead body. Shortly after, Yoo-jin gets a phone call informing her that one of her friends is dead. On the other hand, Jae Kyung arrives at the station and realizes he's experiencing withdrawal symptoms from the drug. When he wonders who did this to him, he figures it might be Chul-gu, who wants to get revenge. On the way out of the station, Jae Kyung tries to call Jun-soo again, but his phone turns out to be right beside him, as part of the evidence from the body they discovered at the construction site. That's when Jae Kyung learns that Jun-soo is dead. Jae Kyung starts to lose consciousness, so he enters a taxi to the hospital and passes out. When he comes to, Jae Kyung sees that his blood has been drawn by the doctors and realizes what will happen if they test it. He then pushes the nurse out of the way and locks the door. There, he drinks the blood to get rid of it and tries to crush the drug too. When security shows up to unlock the door, Jae Kyung pushes past them and runs away. Later, Chang-soo is called to the station to take a look at the footage of Jae Kyung's bizarre behavior. One of the doctors even informs him that he seemed addicted to drugs, but before he could speak further, Jae Kyung showed up acting normal again. He insisted that he acted that way because they took his blood without consent and managed to talk his way out of the situation. Afterwards, Chang-soo asked what was going on, but Jae Kyung maintained the same story. However, when Chang-soo asked why Jae-kyung came to the hospital, Jae-kyung told him he didn't need to know. Next, Jae-kyung went up to Cholgu's room and asked him what he knew about the drug, his kidnapping, and Junsa. Cholgu claimed he didn't know anything, so Jae-kyung tortured him till he revealed the supplier of the drug was someone called CEO Yoon. Meanwhile, Jin-wook, the man with Jae-kyung's gun, met up with CEO Yoon, who was actually a woman. Jin-wook said he was waiting for the doctor to contact him with the next drug shipment, so CEO Yoon warned that if he didn't deliver more of it by the following day, she would stop dealing the drug. Once Jin-wook leaves, one of Yoon's men wonders why the doctor refused to deal with them directly, since that was the condition for abducting Jae-kyung. Meanwhile, Jae-kyung returned to the subway station to check the security footage. There he saw himself being carried inside the station by two men in masks, but they had no idea who they were. Later, Jae-kyung wonders who the doctor and CEO Yoon are and how they are connected to Junso's death. He then heads to the Violent Crimes Division and is surprised to hear that Junso's autopsy has already been done. When Jae-kyung asks who the prosecutor on the case is, the officer says it's Prosecutor Ta-jin, one of Jae-kyung's old classmates. At that same moment, an officer named Kyung-hwan contacted Ta-jin to tell him Jae-kyung was asking about the Junso case. Afterwards, Kyung-hwan insisted Jae-kyung had asked enough questions and asked him to leave. Jae-kyung noticed Junso's phone on the table, so he grabbed it and ran into the bathroom to look through it. While the other officers tried to recover the evidence, Jae-kyung saw that the last people Junso contacted were Ta-jin, Chi-yun, and Jong-soo, who were all old classmates too. Jae-kyung returned to his department and told Chang-soo to track the mystery number while he texted it. Jae-kyung asks the doctor how he knows about 1882, but the doctor simply tells him to go to Junso's funeral. Chang-soo says the phone was moving toward the university hospital, and Jae-kyung figures that's where Junso's body must be. Jae-kyung rushes to the hospital where he discovers Junso's body had been handed over to his wife without an autopsy. He then rushes to the morgue where he finds Yoo-jin. He asks why Junso had also called her the day before, but she claims she missed his call and forgot to return. Yoo-jin scolds him for making a fuss when everyone is upset, so Jae-kyung rushes over to the morgue to see Junso for himself. He asks the wife, Hee-yoon, to stop shrouding Junso's body, but this angers Yoon-ho, one of his former classmates. Just then, Tae-jin, Chi-yun, and Jong-soo show up, so Jae-kyung asks Tae-jin why he thinks Junso killed himself when the crime scene didn't make any sense. Tae-jin insisted there was no foul play, so Jae-kyung pointed out that Junso had contacted all three of them at past 10 when his time of death was 11:30. However, they all claimed Junso called to see how they were doing. Jae-kyung insisted it made no sense causing Chi-yun to try and attack him. Suddenly, Ji-yoon broke down and began to cry, so Junso's body was returned to the morgue for now. Afterwards, they moved to the cafeteria where Jae-kyung asked Yoo-jin if Junso was the type to kill himself. Yoo-jin reminded him that Junso had just lost his 6-year-old daughter, so it was possible. Just then, they noticed Ji-yoon leaving, so Jae-kyung goes to apologize, while Yoo-jin offers to drive her home. After they leave, Ju-song, another old classmate, shows up and asks Jae-kyung what happened. He then goes to pay his respects and greet the others. Meanwhile, Yoo-jin waits for Ji-yoon downstairs as she goes up to grab something. While she waits, the security guard hands her some envelopes to give to Ji-yoon. Back at the cafeteria, Ju-song tells Jae-kyung that Yoo-jin's ex-husband had carried her child abroad. However, the man didn't earn any money and was living off the child support that Yoo-jin provided, which wasn't a lot. He then changed the topic and revealed that Junso had approached him a week ago to take out a life insurance policy. However, he warned him that there would be no payout if Junso ever killed himself, which makes his death seem off. Just then, Tae-jin addressed the whole cafeteria and explained that Junso had written a will leaving $5 million from his audiophile company for Jae-kyung and Tae-jin to split equally. Meanwhile, Yoo-jin had also torn into the envelopes handed to her and discovered the same thing. Just then, Ji-yoon returned from her apartment, so Yoo-jin hid the papers and led her back to the car. As they headed back, Yoo-jin suggested that Ji-yoon order an autopsy just to be at rest so that there was no foul play involved. Meanwhile, Jong-soo pulled Tae-jin aside to ask why he read the will in front of the others. Tae-jin explains that if Jae-kyung continues to make trouble, everyone will assume it's because of the insurance money. Meanwhile, Ju-song informed Jae-kyung that there was actually a third name on the life insurance and wondered why Tae-jin left that part out. The last person was Myung-guk, and even though neither of them knew who he was, Ju-song gave Jae-kyung his number. Just then, Ji-yoon and Yoo-jin returned. Yoo-jin began asking Ju-song questions about life insurance, so they figured she found out about her name in the will too. Yoo-jin tells Jae-kyung she also thinks something suspicious about Junso's death, but Jae-kyung figures she just wants life support. Jae-kyung finds Tae-jin and insists they perform the autopsy, but Tae-jin warns that they'd be the prime suspects of Jun-se's death if they find something in the autopsy. Regardless, Jae-kyung rushes to convince Ji-yoon when he notices a police officer with her who asks to take them to the station. Tae-jin asks if it's about the will, making Ji-yoon wonder what he's talking about. Tae-jin then reveals the truth about the insurance policy, causing Ji-yoon to accuse everyone of taking advantage of her husband's death. Later at the police station, Hyung-hwan asks why Jae-kyung and Yoo-jin would leave so much money to them when they weren't close. Jae-kyung agrees that it seems fishy, which is why they needed to do an autopsy. Tae-jin interrupts the interview and insists it isn't necessary since the family doesn't want one. However, Ji-yoon suddenly changes her mind and says she wants the autopsy done because she doesn't believe her husband would kill himself. After, Tae-jin meets with Jong-soo, who tells him to make sure nothing turns up in the autopsy. Tae-jin reminds him that they both saw what happened, so there was no way anything would turn up. That night, they all watch as the autopsy is finally conducted. Then they hold a funeral for Jun-se the next day. There, Yoo-jin gets mad that Jae-kyung didn't even show up for the funeral, but she tells Ju-song it would take a month for the autopsy results to be revealed. Down at the station, two men were brought in for fighting, and that same drug was discovered in one of their pockets. Jae-kyung went in to interview them and asked about the effect of the drugs in exchange for the pill. The druggie named Min-ho told him the drug had suddenly become scarce in the last 2 weeks. Then he attacked Jae-kyung, hoping to get the one he had, but was unsuccessful. Later, the narcotics team discussed their information about the drug, so Yeon-ju dismissed them to continue investigating. Before Jae-kyung left, she reminded him to turn in his firearm as the guy in charge was asking for it. Later, Jae-kyung met with Chang-soo, who informed him that Myung-guk, the last person on the will, had been reported missing 7 months ago. At the same time, Yoo-jin met with Ju-song and said she knew who Myung-guk was. He worked at Kumyung Pharmaceuticals, which is the same company where Jong-soo is the CEO. Apparently, Myung-guk had wanted to report some internal corruption, but before he could meet with Yoo-jin, he went missing. Later, Jae-kyung went to meet with Myung-guk's daughter to ask what her father did. She only knew he was a researcher and didn't have much to say. Suddenly, Jae-kyung began to feel dizzy and quickly left her house. He stumbled down the stairs and then collapsed just as Yoo-jin was driving by and saw him. She immediately helped into her car and offered to drive him to the hospital, but Jae-kyung insisted he take her to his apartment instead. There, she found a package outside his door, so she grabbed it as she helped carry him inside. As Jae-kyung lay on the floor, Yoo-jin opened the package and discovered the same drug that the woman from her apartment had taken. When Jae-kyung asked her to hand it over, she locked herself in the bathroom and asked Jae-kyung why he would do drugs. Jae-kyung tries to force his way into the bathroom, so Yoo-jin begs him to come to his senses as she holds the door down. When Jae-kyung gives up, Yoo-jin flushes the drug down the toilet and sneaks out of the bathroom. Before he leaves, Jae-kyung calls out to her and tells her Jun-se had come to see him before he died. He laments that it was the 10th time in 20 years that Jun-se had apologized and he still never forgave him. When Yoo-jin asks how Jae-kyung ended up addicted, Jae-kyung explains that he was abducted and forced to get addicted to the drug. Now he has no idea how Jun-se, who was a realtor, had anything to do with the drugs. Yoo-jin advises Jae-kyung to tell the others the truth, but Jae-kyung says he'd be taken off the case if he does, and no one else will be interested in the case. Yoo-jin agrees to help. They drive over to Myung-guk's house. When they look around, they find a sealed room and manage to force their way in. Inside, they find a decomposing body wrapped in a plastic bag. Jae-kyung cuts it open and discovers Myung-guk's body, so he calls Chang-soo and gives him the address of the house where the body is. Yoo-jin discovers a picture of Myung-guk that shows he was a senior in their music club in school. 20 years ago, Yoo-jin was serving a punishment for being rude to the teacher. On her way home, she heard music and discovered a club Jun-se had started called Audiophile and asked to join in. Not long after, Jae-kyung also asked to join the club, then Ju-song did the same. Back in the present, Yoo-jin points out the excess water from the body, so Jae-kyung says Myung-guk must have been dead and frozen for a long time and was only recently placed in the house. Suddenly, someone throws Molotov cocktails into the building, forcing Jae-kyung and Yoo-jin to run out of the house. Jae-kyung begins to collapse again, so Jae-kyung asks her to drive him to the police station. As they drive off, Chang-soo arrives at the house to find it burning. He tries to call Jae-kyung, but can't get to him. Meanwhile, Yoo-jin points out that Audiophile seems to be a connection between Myung-guk and Jun-se, but it seems those photos were placed deliberately for them to find. After Jae-kyung makes it to the station and remembers one of his teammates stashing the drug in her drawer, he rushes to look through the drawer when he suddenly passes out. Later, he wakes up in the bathroom and realizes he took the drug again. When he heads back to the office, everything seems normal and put back in place. However, Jae-kyung spots a security camera that would have captured everything. He immediately rushes to check the footage, but discovers that part of it has been erased. The security guards explain that it's a glitch in the system, which is what they told Chang-Soo when he came earlier to check them out. Meanwhile, Yoo-jin receives a text from the same strange number about a medication accident at Woonjong Medical Center involving Park Bok-rae. However, when she tries to call the number, it goes straight to voicemail. Back at the station, Jae-kyung suspects that Chang-Soo knows about his addiction. Chang-Soo was the first person he saw at the subway station after his abduction, and he was the only one he told about Myung-guk's body before the house was suddenly lit on fire. With this, Jae-kyung takes a look at Chang-Soo's computer and discovers the footage of him from the hospital, deepening his suspicion. Meanwhile, Yoo-jin asks her colleague, Woo-sung, for help with investigating the Woonjong Medical Center case. They head to Park Bok-rae's house and meet her son, who refuses to give any information about the case. Back at the station, Jae-kyung interviews Min-ho again and asks where he got his pills. Min-ho doesn't know the man's name, but he mentions that he had a tattoo on his fingers. At the same moment, Jun-ho, who is the man with the tattoo, meets with Jin-wook to collect the new shipment of drugs from the doctor. Jin-wook then points out that the person he spoke to wasn't the real doctor, since he didn't know Jin-wook was never supposed to contact the doctor directly. Back at the station, the woman who kept the drug in her desk drawer finally realizes that it's missing. She tells Chang-Soo about it. They both report to Jae-kyung. Jae-kyung scolds them for being careless and asks if either of them has checked the security footage. They both say they haven't, but Jae-kyung knows Chang-Soo is lying. Jae-kyung tells the woman to delete the records of the evidence while he tells Chang-Soo to wait behind. Chang-Soo shows Jae-kyung the footage of the CCTV camera near Myung-guk's house. There, they see a compact vehicle leaving the scene with tape over the license plate and a black SUV. Jae-kyung says he was in the black SUV and asks why Chang-Soo wasn't curious about him leaving in a hurry. Chang-Soo manages to answer all of Jae-kyung's questions. Something still feels off. Meanwhile, Ju-sung goes over to Ji-yoon at her request. There, Ji-yoon reveals her theory that Jun-seo left his insurance policy to Jae-kyung and Yoo-jin as bait, since he's an investigator and she's a reporter. She insists that the money was left for her and she deserves to be involved. At the same time, Jong-soo discovers the news report about Myung-guk's death, which may implicate Kyumyung Pharmaceuticals. He immediately calls up Ta-jin and they agree to meet. There, Ta-jin assures Jong-soo that finding Myung-guk's body is a good thing since he can't expose them anymore. He then tells Jong-soo to focus on more important matters and hands him a document for a Pilodong development plan. Ta-jin then assures Jong-soo that he will make him the chairman of the Kyumyung group. Back at the station, Jae-kyung goes to the crime division to ask if they'd retrieved the CCTV footage near the construction site where Jun-seo died. The officer claims they didn't find anything and can't show him the footage under Officer Kyung-won's orders. When he leaves, Chang-Soo sends Jae-kyung a facial composite of the drug dealer from the subway station. That night, Ta-jin goes to see Ji-yoon and strangles her, demanding she give him the password. When she starts to pass out, he lets her go, but she refuses to cooperate. She then demands $1 million as hush money, or else she'll reveal they've been having an affair. Outside, Yoo-jin pulls up to Ji-yoon's apartment to check on her when she suddenly notices Tae-jin and Ji-yoon come out, so she decides to follow them. Meanwhile, Jae-kyung heads to the construction site to ask if they have any other entrance into the site. The man then reveals a shady back entrance that was closed off after Jun-seo's death. Jae-kyung notices a store selling chukbok mill and rice cakes, so he asks to take a look at the man's security camera. On it, Jae-kyung sees Jun-seo arrive at the site, and shortly after, a black SUV pulls up too. Jae-kyung asks if anyone else had asked for the CCTV footage before him, so the man says Jun-seo had asked to see it at least 6 months ago. At this, Jae-kyung leaves to get a flash drive from his car, but in that time, Yoon-ho rushes to the chukbok mill and grabs a pair of scissors. Yoon-ho exits the store with bloody hands and drives off while Jae-kyung returns to find the store owner dying and the CCTV server has been set on fire. The store owner hands Jae-kyung a flash drive and finally dies. Meanwhile, Yoon-ho stops somewhere to wash off his hands. There, a kid notices the blood on his hands and gets scared, but Yoon-ho flashes him a creepy smile and leaves. Back at the chukbok mill, more officers arrive on the scene to investigate. Jae-kyung heads outside to map out the killer's escape route. Knowing he must have been watching him if he committed the murder in such a short window of time, he figures out a likely route and asks an old lady if she saw any car parked there earlier. The woman says she did and reveals that it was a silver taxi. With this information, Jae-kyung goes to tell Kyung-hwan that the suspect is either a taxi driver or an accomplice of the taxi driver. However, Kyung-hwan accuses Jae-kyung of interfering with his cases, which aren't in the narcotics jurisdiction. Meanwhile, Yoon-ho contacts Ji-yeon and informs him that they were filmed on the security camera at the chukbok mill. When he tells Ji-yeon that he's taken care of, Ji-yeon insists he meet with him immediately. When they meet, Shi-yun punches Yoon-ho for being so reckless. However, Yoon-ho assures him he didn't leave behind any evidence that he did it. At the same time, Jae-kyung returns to his apartment to find another package waiting outside. When he opens it, he discovers it's more drugs, so he tries to destroy them, but he's unable to, causing him to break down in frustration. Meanwhile, Hyung-hwan calls Tae-jin and informs him about the murder near the construction site where Jun-seo died. When he mentions the CCTV the mill had taken, Tae-jin gets nervous, but is relieved when Kyung-hwan says the server was burnt. Back at Jae-kyung's apartment, Jae-kyung watches the footage from the flash drive and sees Jun-seo arrive in a taxi. Next, a black SUV pulls up, so Jae-kyung takes note of the license plate and calls up a colleague to do a vehicle check on the owner. Meanwhile, Yoo-jin asks Woo-sung to help keep an eye on Ji-yoon's movements while she heads to the Wonjong Medical Center. There, she questions one of the staff about the Park Bok-ri case, and the man gets really nervous. Suddenly, the director arrives and takes over the interview. Yoo-jin accuses them of trying to cover up a case of mistaken prescription, but the director insists that they did everything correctly and have nothing to hide. She accuses Mrs. Park's son of trying to damage their reputation and ends the interview. Meanwhile, Jun-ho shows Jin-wook a drawing of him, calling him a wanted man. However, Jin-wook isn't bothered about it and is more worried that CEO Yoon might use it as an excuse to contact the doctor directly. He then tells Jun-ho to be careful and only do business with known contacts. Back at the station, Yoo-jin shows up to check on Jae-kyung and bring him lunch. There, Jae-kyung informs her that the murder at the mill and Myung-guk's murder were somehow all linked to Jun-seo's murder, which was somehow linked to drugs. When he showed her the text he received from the mysterious doctor, Yoo-jin revealed that she had also received a text from the same number about Park Bok-ri's death. Suddenly, Joo-sung called Yoo-jin and informed her that he had discovered the address linked to Jun-seo's audiophile business. They all head to the address, which turns out to be a small house where they meet a young boy named Yeon-woo. The boy instantly guesses their names and explains that Jun-seo told him they would come around. Apparently, the boy was a delivery rider, but when Jae-kyung asked if he ever delivered drugs, he denied it. Joo-sung stepped out to assist the boy's grandmother with her walnuts. When Jae-kyung and Yoo-jin were done with Yeon-woo, Jae-kyung revealed that Jun-seo was found dead and reportedly killed himself. He explained that their house was his company's address, which is why they came to meet them. After this, Joo-sung scolded Jae-kyung for announcing Jun-seo's death so coldly and being inconsiderate. He then pointed out that Jae-kyung did the same thing to Jun-seo 20 years ago by forcing him to talk when he wasn't ready. The drive back was tense and awkward, so Jae-kyung told Joo-sung to drop him off at a certain point. Jae-kyung then headed to Ji-yoon's apartment, which was still being watched by Woo-sung. He immediately calls Yoo-jin to inform her, making her wonder what Jae-kyung is doing there. Meanwhile, Jae-kyung asks Ji-yoon if he could take a look at Jun-seo's laptop and hard drives. However, after checking all of his videos, he couldn't find anything that would help with the case. He decided to leave, but before he could open the door, he heard the passcode activated from outside, and Tae-jin came in. Jae-kyung asks Tae-jin how he knew the passcode to the house, so Ji-yoon interrupts and claims she gave it to him during the investigation. Jae-kyung asked why Tae-jin was visiting her at such an odd hour, so Tae-jin claimed he wanted to personally deliver details about the investigation. Jae-kyung doesn't buy his story, and when they leave, he tells Tae-jin it doesn't make sense that he would have updates on the case since he claims Jun-seo killed himself. However, Tae-jin sticks to his story and leaves. After Jae-kyung returns to the station where Chang-soo informs him that he wasn't able to locate CEO Yoon, Jae-kyung acts coldly toward him, so Chang-soo asks if he's offended him in some way. At this, Jae-kyung begins to question him about the odd coincidences surrounding Chang-soo and the fact that he lied about checking the CCTV footage. Chang-soo then confesses to finding the office in a mess and checking the footage, but not finding anything on it either. Meanwhile, Yoo-jin joins Woo-sung to follow Tae-jin and Ji-yoon to a coffee shop. Yoo-jin tells Woo-sung to go in and record them, so Woo-sung pretends to be a regular customer while he sets up a recording device so Yoo-jin can listen in. She hears Ji-yoon refuse to give Tae-jin the passcode unless he divorces his wife, but Tae-jin claims that it wasn't that easy. He then reminds her that the passcode will unlock enough money to start over again somewhere, shocking Yoo-jin, who wonders what money they're referring to. Meanwhile, Jae-kyung with Yeon-ju, who accused him of clearly hiding details from her. At this, Jae-kyung explains everything that has happened since he got that text message from the doctor, but he leaves out the part about him being addicted to drugs. Yeon-ju promises to help as long as he keeps her in the loop, so she meets the man in charge of collecting officers' firearms and buys Jae-kyung some time to recover his missing gun. At the same time, Jong-soo has an important presentation with the board of directors, led by his dad, Chang-ho. However, everything Jong-soo says was actually given to him by Tae-jin, who did all the work for him. He presents the Pilo-dong development plan and hopes to get the mayor to make an investment in their company. Afterwards, Jong-soo meets with his dad, who can immediately tell that the proposal was all Ta-jin's idea. He then tells Jong-soo to continue to give Ta-jin whatever he needs to support him. As Jong-soo leaves, he remembers how this all started 20 years ago. Jong-soo was failing in school despite all of his tutor's help. However, one day, he saw Ta-jin meet with Chang-ho, who offered him money in exchange for staying by Jong-soo's side and making him the richest man in Korea. Meanwhile, in the present, the narcotics team was trying to set up a meeting with Min-ho's dealer, but he wasn't responding. However, Jae-kyung began to feel the withdrawal symptoms again and began stumbling through the station when Kyung-hwan noticed him acting strangely. Jae-kyung quickly hid in the evidence room to buy himself some time, but when Kyung-hwan followed after him to ask what he was doing, Jae-kyung claimed he was just catching a cold and threatened to spread it to him. Meanwhile, Yoo-jin got a call from Park Bok-ri's son, who was outraged that she was asking questions at the hospital. However, when Yoo-jin scolded him for not wanting justice for his mom, he agreed to meet with her. There, the man explained that his mom had cancer and was being treated at the hospital when she was suddenly prescribed a new drug. The man hands her the drug called Xinopharm, and Yoo-jin notices it was made by Kumyung Pharmaceuticals. The man explains that his mom suddenly started seizing after taking the drug and eventually died. After the incident, someone from Kumyung Pharmaceuticals came to take the drugs back. Thankfully, the man saved his business card, and Yoo-jin saw that it belonged to Jun-seo. Meanwhile, Jong-soo was about to give a lecture on behalf of Kumyung Pharmaceuticals when he began to feel uncomfortable and suddenly collapsed on the table. Shi-yeon quickly rushed him to a private room to resuscitate him, and there, another old classmate named Sang-yu, who worked in the company, handed him a drug to stabilize Jong-soo. Back at the station, the narcotics team finally get an appointment with Jun-ho. After, Jae-kyung meets with Min-ho to make sure Jun-ho doesn't suspect anything. Jae-kyung then asks how Min-ho has been able to survive without the drug for so long, so Min-ho reveals another drug he uses to suppress his appetite. Afterwards, the narcotics team plans for the meeting with Jun-ho, so Jae-kyung volunteers to go in with Min-ho and pretend to be a drug addict. That night, Jae-kyung and Min-ho arrive at the meetup spot while the rest of the officers listen in from a nearby building. Jae-kyung and Min-ho meet with Jun-ho, who is immediately suspicious of Jae-kyung. When they search for him and find nothing, Jun-ho's men hold down Jae-kyung to inject a new version of the drug into his arm. When the rest of the team hears this, they wonder if they should act, but Yeonju points out it might just be Selene to test if he's a cop or not, so she tells them to stand down. Back in the hideout, Jae-kyung gets injected with the drug, convincing Jun-ho that he isn't a cop, so they head upstairs to complete the deal. However, Min-ho suddenly grabs the drugs and runs as he reveals that Jae-kyung is actually a cop. Jae-kyung fights his way through the drug dealers while Jun-ho and Min-ho get away. However, Min-ho is captured by Yeonju while Jae-kyung takes down the last of the dealers. Suddenly, he remembers the syringe Jun-ho used to inject and runs downstairs to retrieve it, only to find Chang-soo hiding the syringe already. Meanwhile, Jun-ho tells Jin-wook that they got busted and their partner, Dae-sung, was arrested. Jun-ho says he won't go home and will lay low till their next deal with CEO Yoon in 3 days. Back at the station, Dae-sung is brought into custody while Yeonju shows Jae-kyung that the car Dae-sung was driving belongs to a man nicknamed Straw. She then tells Jae-kyung and Chang-soo to track Straw down before he disappears. Suddenly, Yeonju asks what happened to the syringe at the site, but Jae-kyung claims Jun-ho must have taken it with him. When they leave, Jae-kyung asks Chang-soo how long he's known about the addiction, so Chang-soo reveals that he'd found him that day at the station when he took the drug. Chang-soo claimed that he knew Jae-kyung would have a good reason for keeping it to himself and decided to wait till Jae-kyung revealed the truth. At the same time, Yoo-jin wondered why Jun-seo had a Kumyung Pharmaceuticals card, so she went to the company hoping to speak with the director. Meanwhile, Young-woo gets a call from a strange number that he thinks is Jun-seo. This reminds him of a time when Jun-seo called him to a strange building and handed him some boxes to deliver to separate locations. However, when Young-woo was on his way, he got knocked down from his bike and mixed up all the drugs with him. He then delivered a single box to Chi-yeon, while the rest of the boxes were delivered to Woonjong Medical Center. In the present, Yeon-woo returns to the building where he met Jun-seo, but this time he spots Chi-yeon and decides to follow him. Chi-yeon returns to the company where he finds Yoo-jin waiting, so he tells his men to grab her, and they force her into a car while Yeon-woo watches. Yeon-woo then contacts Joo-sung to inform him that Yoo-jin is being kidnapped. Joo-sung tries to inform Jae-kyung, but he ignores his call to meet with Straw. After informing him that his car was found with drugs in it, Straw insists that he wasn't the one driving the car. At this, Jae-kyung tells Straw to find out who was. Meanwhile, Joo-sung arrives at Kumyung Pharmaceuticals to find Yoo-jin when she casually walks out unharmed. The two leave and they head to a bar where Joo-sung asks what happened. Yoo-jin remembers asking Chi-yeon what Jun-seo was doing with their company. That's when Chi-yeon revealed that Kumyung Pharmaceuticals was Jong-soo's test to becoming chairman of the group. Because of this, they all pitched in to sell the drugs, which is why Jun-seo had a business card. Yoo-jin doesn't buy his story, so Chi-yeon hands her a bribe and shows pictures of herself, accepting favors from people she has dirt on. Jae-kyung joins them at the bar, but when he sees Yoo-jin looking sad, he allows her to drown her sorrows in alcohol. Meanwhile, Chang-ho finds out that Jong-soo passed out during a lecture, so he goes to see him and hands him a plane ticket to leave the country for good. Jong-soo pleads with his dad and insists he'll never do drugs while Tae-jin helps him salvage the situation. Back at the station, Jae-kyung gets the ownership details of the black SUV that was spotted near the construction site that night. He then goes to question the woman and asks why she suddenly stopped her car. The woman explains that a man suddenly appeared in front of her, causing her to stop, so Jae-kyung collects a copy of her car's camera footage. Meanwhile, Chang-soo discovers CEO Yoon's hideout, but it turns out he knew her all along. Chang-soo asks if she was responsible for drugging Jae-kyung, but she denies it and says she has nothing to benefit from it. She then tucks some money into Chang-soo's pocket to keep the police off their tails. Meanwhile, Chung-hwan meets with Ta-jin to tell him about the murder at the mill. He then informs him of Jae-kyung's suspicion that the culprit is the taxi owner. After hearing this, Ta-jin sets up a meeting with Jong-soo and Chi-yeon to discuss Jong-soo's meeting with the mayor. Suddenly, Yoon-ho walks in, causing Chi-yeon to demand to know what he's doing there, till Ta-jin reveals he invited him. When Jong-soo discovers Yoon-ho killed the mill owner, he freaks out and asks Chi-yeon how he could let this happen. However, Ta-jin assures them everything is still fine for now, but warns them to keep an eye on Yoon-ho. Meanwhile, Jae-kyung checks the footage from the SUV and finds Sang-yui on it. He immediately tracks Sang-yui down to ask what he was doing at the construction site the day Jun-seo died, since his number wasn't one of the ones on the phone. Sang-yui explains that he was with Jun-seo when he asked the other guys to come to the site, so Jun-seo invited him in person too. According to him, he met Ta-jin there, followed by Jong-soo and Chi-yeon, but before they could meet with Jun-seo on the 9th floor, they saw something fall and discovered it was Jun-seo. Jae-kyung asks if they confirmed he was really dead, so Sang-yui says Ta-jin was the one who checked. Meanwhile, Jong-soo finally meets with the mayor and offers to help him with his goal of building a bio-industry complex. However, the mayor points out that Kyumyung Pharmaceuticals has experienced a drop in sales 3 years in a row, and the banks refuse to give them any more loans. The mayor then refuses his offer and walks away. Back at the company, Sang-yui and Jae-kyung head downstairs as Jae-kyung reveals his plan to ask the others what happened that night. He then asks Sang-yui if he really thinks Jun-seo killed himself, so Sang-yui says he doesn't because at the time, Jun-seo was wearing his shoes, but the police said they found his shoes on the 9th floor. Later, Jae-kyung goes to see Chi-yeon and asks why he killed Jun-seo. Chi-yeon denies killing him, so Jae-kyung reveals that he knows they were all at the site that day. Chi-yeon gives a similar story to Sang-yui, but says he doesn't remember if Jun-seo was wearing his shoes or not. Jae-kyung then tells him to warn the others that he's coming, so they can get their stories straight. Meanwhile, Chang-ho meets with Jong-soo, who tells him the mayor refuses to work with them because of their financial standing. Chang-ho then tells Jong-soo that the Pylodon project is likely their last chance to get back on their feet. If they fail, they'll be in debt for the rest of their lives. Back at the police station, Jae-kyung asked one of the officers in the violent crimes unit if they had any more footage from near the Chupbok mill. The officer knows he's not to go against Kyung-won's orders, but he asks Jae-kyung to meet him in the lounge. After getting the footage, Jae-kyung asks Yoon-ju to watch it with him, but they're unable to find the silver taxi, which means it must have taken another route. Yoon-ju tells another officer to check the footage on nearby CCTVs, hoping one of them will catch it. Meanwhile, Ju-song goes to visit Yun-woo and his grandma. Moments later, he calls Jae-kyung to inform him that Yun-woo was actually following Chi-yeon the day he saw Yoo-jin getting kidnapped. After hearing this, Jae-kyung rushed to the house on the hill and was joined by Yoo-jin. They go in to ask Yun-woo why he was following Chi-yeon, so he tells them about the strange number that called him, which caused him to go to the building where he had last met Jun-seo for a delivery. That day, Jun-seo's daughter was really sick, so he couldn't make the deliveries by himself, but that was also the day Yun-woo got the drugs mixed up. Later, Jun-seo had shown up and accused him of selling the drugs, but Yun-woo insisted he didn't. That was when Jun-seo got a call from the medical center confirming the receipt of all the drugs. Jun-seo hoped they hadn't prescribed them yet, but it was already too late. Some days later, Jun-seo showed up and apologized to Yun-woo, but that was the last time he came to the house. After, Jae-kyung hands Yoo-jin and Ju-song some of Myung-guk's logs to look over and asks them to meet at his place the next day. Jae-kyung then asks Yoo-jin to ride in his car so he can ask her for a favor. They stop at a clinic downtown and Yoo-jin pretends to be a drug addict so she can get a prescription for those appetite suppressors Min-ho mentioned. Next, they head to the location where Yun-woo said he met Jun-seo. The building turns out to be a freezer storage unit, but when they look inside, they don't find anything suspicious. However, outside, Jae-kyung notices a yellow balloon which he remembers seeing outside the mill. He then runs up the street and discovers there's a route that links directly to the mill. Just then he gets a call from his teammate saying a small kid reported sighting a man with blood on his hands somewhere near the mill. Jae-kyung asks her to find CCTV footage near the area, so when he returns to the station, he and Yeon-ju watch the footage and finally find the silver taxi with a plate number. At the same moment, Yoon-ho follows Tae-jin and sees him leaving Ji-yoon's place at night, revealing that they're having an affair. 20 years ago, Jong-soo discovered that Sang-yu had been bullied by Kyung-tae. Because of this, Yoon-ho, Tae-jin, Jong-soo, and Chi-yeon all set out to teach Kyung-tae a lesson. At the time, Kyung-tae was with another classmate named Yoo-min as they tried to light a stove. Yoo-min went to the bathroom for a moment when Jong-soo and the boys showed up and began beating Kyung-tae up. Yoo-min looked away in horror, but when he looked back, the compound was on fire. Back in the present, Yoon-ho woke up and told his wife he was going to the temple to pray. Shortly after he left, Jae-kyung appeared and asked where Yoon-ho was. She described where the temple was, so Yeon-ju told Jae-kyung to stay with his wife and keep her distracted while they tracked Yoon-ho down. Jae-kyung entered the compound and saw a compact vehicle beside some tape, which could have covered the plate number. He then found equipment in the back seat, proving Yoon-ho was probably the one who threw the Molotov cocktails in Myung-guk's house. After Jae-kyung entered the house, Yoon-ho's wife had a feeling something was wrong. When she asked if Yoon-ho had gotten in trouble again, Jae-kyung admitted he had, and the police were on their way to arrest him. Angered, the wife quickly grabbed her phone and called Yoon-ho to warn him to leave the temple and stay away from home. Jae-kyung then called Yeon-ju and Yoon-ho had found out they were coming. Meanwhile, Hyung-hwan scolded his unit for not checking the taxi drivers closely enough. Now, all the murder cases are being handed over to Jae-kyung and the narcotics team. Hyung-hwan then called Tae-jin to inform him he was off the case and the culprit was on the run. Back at the police station, Jae-kyung contacted Yoo-jin to help him get rid of the package that was outside his door. While Yoo-jin threw the drugs away, Jae-kyung took the appetite suppressants and hoped they would work. He then met up with Yoo-jin outside the Chupbok mill. There, Jae-kyung wondered why Yoon-ho was going through so much trouble to hide evidence when he wasn't even at the construction site that day. Meanwhile, Tae-jin tells Jong-soo and Chi-yeon that the police had found out about Yoon-ho and he was now on the run. Jong-soo immediately began to panic and resorted to doing drugs again. Chi-yeon then informed the men that Jae-kyung had come to see him earlier, but he also denied having anything to do with Jun-seo's death. However, he asks Tae-jin and Jong-soo why they showed up at a construction site at midnight so obediently, thinking they might have something to do with it. Tae-jin asks why Chi-yeon also went obediently, so Chi-yeon reveals that he killed Myung-guk. At the time, Myung-guk was asking for thousands of dollars to stay quiet, so Chi-yeon plotted with Yoon-ho to carry Myung-guk somewhere just to scare him. However, Yoon-ho used too much force and ended up killing him. They dumped his body in a drum and hid it at the back of the freezer so no one would find him. However, Chi-yeon says he has no idea who retrieved Myung-guk's body and put it in the house, but he suspects at least 2 people are involved. That the same day, Jae-kyung and Yoo-jin returned to the freezer storage unit where Jae-kyung suspects Myung-guk's body was stored for 7 months. There, Jae-kyung realizes Yoon-ho was probably trying to erase the footage of the night he left Myung-guk's body in the freezer storage. Afterwards, Yoo-jin took Jae-kyung back to the police station where they tried to figure out who had drugged Jae-kyung. Yoo-jin then suggested that someone might be using Jae-kyung to cause problems for Jun-soo and push him out of Kumyong Pharmaceuticals. This was most likely Tae-jin. Meanwhile, Tae-jin met with Chang-ho, who noticed some issues with Tae-jin's business proposal. Tae-jin had asked to become one of the investors in the business, so Chang-ho warned him not to forget his place or he'll be replaced. That night, Ju-song showed up early for the meeting at Jae-kyung's apartment, and he brought along a cake for Yoo-jin's birthday. Suddenly, Yoo-jin showed up early too, so Ju-song rushed to hide the cake on the balcony while Yoo-jin stepped in and took a phone call in the bathroom. Ju-song overheard Yoo-jin mention a password that would unlock lots of money and insisted she had to discover the password first. Yoo-jin and Ju-song then returned to the living room and all 3 of them began checking through Myung-guk's logs. There, they discovered that Sang-ui was the researcher under Myung-guk and that the freezer storage unit was also owned by Kumyong Pharmaceuticals. At that same moment, Sang-ui was at the freezer storage checking the security footage of when Jae-kyung and Yoo-jin stopped by. Meanwhile, Ji-yoon suddenly showed up at Jae-kyung's apartment and claimed she wanted to help. She informed them of an address that had been receiving Jun-seo's pension payments, even though neither she nor Jun-seo had any connections to the place. Jin asked for the address, but Ji-yoon insisted they go together since her husband only left them the insurance money as bait. She then insisted the money rightfully belonged to her and called Jin shameless for trying to take it. Meanwhile, Tae-jin relived the memory of the night Jun-seo died. He was with Ji-yoon when Jun-seo called him and revealed he knew about the affair. He then threatened to tell the guys what they'd been up to and told Tae-jin to come to the construction site. In the present, Tae-jin gets a call from Yoon-ho, who informs him he also knows about the affair and threatens to tell Jong-soo if he doesn't help him hide from the police. Back at Jae-kyung's apartment, Yoo-jin was about to leave when Joo-sung brought out her birthday cake to celebrate. When Ji-yoon realized that day was her birthday, she suddenly broke down and ran into the bathroom. There, she remembered Jun-seo giving her a special passcode which turned out to be Yoo-jin's birthday. Ji-yoon then leaves the apartment in a hurry. Seeing this, Yoo-jin informs Jae-kyung that Woo-sung has been following Ji-yoon all night, so they meet up with him and follow her back to the coffee shop, where she meets Tae-jin again. Woo-sung goes in and plants a recording device in the flower pot near their table so the whole group can listen to their conversation. There, Ji-yoon asks Tae-jin if Jun-seo and Yoo-jin ever dated in school. Tae-jin says they did, but doesn't understand why she called him out for this. He then tells her to make up her mind about the money that weekend or he'll lose interest. After Tae-jin leaves, Jae-kyung asks Yoo-jin if she knows what money he's referring to. Yoo-jin claims she doesn't, but Joo-sung remembers the conversation he overheard while they were at Jae-kyung's apartment. The next day at the police station, Jae-kyung, Chang-soo, and Straw talk to Dae-sung. When Dae-sung realizes that Straw is the man who is famous for killing men with a single straw, he immediately gives up the names of the other drug dealers, which are Jun-ho and Jin-wook. Later, Chang-soo informs Jae-kyung that he's going over to Jun-ho's address to look for him. Just then, Jae-kyung gets a tip about Gi-sung, one of the men who left him at the subway station after he was abducted. At the same time, Jun-ho goes to meet with CEO Yoon to collect the money for their last shipment. Jun-ho then calls Jin-wook to tell him where he is, but he gets hit over the head with a vase. CEO Yoon then grabs the phone and tells Jin-wook to come to their shop in 30 minutes if he wants to save his friend. Meanwhile, Chang-soo arrives at Jun-ho's apartment but doesn't find anyone there. When he leaves, he gets a call from CEO Yoon, who tells him to come to her building's basement and arrest Jun-ho and Jin-wook. At the same time, Jae-kyung finds Gi-sung exiting a shop and decides to follow him. Gi-sung goes all the way to a shopping mall, but by the time Jae-kyung gets there, he loses track of Gi-sung. Just then, Jin-wook arrives at the same building and heads to CEO Yoon's office while Jae-kyung continues to look for Gi-sung. Jae-kyung spots Chang-soo and asks him what he's doing there when they suddenly hear a gunshot. They head to the source and find CEO Yoon bleeding out, but when Jae-kyung tries to help her, he notices the back room and realizes she was the one that drugged him. CEO Yoon admits this, but before he can find out who hired her, she dies. Meanwhile, Yoo-jin goes to see Joo-sung, who knows the passcode to the money is her birthday. Yoo-jin asks if it's okay to keep the money. When Joo-sung says that it's not, she insists that she deserves it more than Tae-jin and Ji-yoon, who stabbed Jun-seo in the back. However, Joo-sung tells her that the fact that she needs to ask him means that she knows it's wrong. After Yoo-jin leaves, she gets a call from her daughter, who wishes her a late happy birthday. Yoo-jin is happy to hear from her regardless, but is heartbroken when her daughter says she has to go already. Back at the shopping mall, Jae-kyung asks Chang-soo what he was doing at the shopping mall since he went to Jun-ho's house. So Chang-soo says he found Jin-wook's address there and tailed him all the way to the mall. Afterwards, Chang-soo helps arrest Gi-sung and offers to drive him to the station alone. On the way, Gi-sung remembers seeing CEO Yoon bribe Chang-soo and threatens to expose him unless he helps him get away. With no other choice, Chang-soo lowers his window, increases his speed, and drives the car into a nearby river. Meanwhile, Tae-jin receives a strange text message and heads to an internet cafe to meet Yoo-jin. There, Yoo-jin says she knows the rest of the passcode and intends to take half of it after she tells him where the money came from. Tae-jin calls her out on pretending where the money came from when she intends to take half of it regardless. At this, Yoo-jin shows him pictures of him and Ji-yoon and recordings of their conversation. She tells him to transfer half of the money to her account in exchange for the recordings. Frustrated, Tae-jin opens the wallet and inputs the first half of the passcode. Yoo-jin then puts in the other half, but it brings up an error, warns them they have one last try before the wallet is shut down. Angered, Tae-jin attacks Yoo-jin and begins to strangle her till Joo-sung shows up and pushes him aside, rescuing Yoo-jin. Meanwhile, police and paramedics arrive at Chang-soo's crash site where Gi-sung is dead and Chang-soo is attended to. When they ask what happened, Chang-soo says Gi-sung had attacked him from behind, so he tried to block him with his right hand, causing him to lose control and swerve off the road. When they take him away, Jae-kyung tells Yoon-ju that Chang-soo's story makes no sense since he should have swerved to the left, away from the water. They then discover that the window of the car had been wound down before it entered the water, confirming Zhao Kyung's suspicions. Meanwhile, Jin Wook contacts the doctor and asks for a way to leave town. In exchange, he sends a subway courier to deliver a package. The doctor turns out to be Sang Yui, and inside the package, he finds Jae Kyung's gun and a flash drive. In the meantime, Yoo Jin recovers from the encounter with Ta Jin. She tells Jae Kyung and Ju Song that the password was for a cryptocurrency wallet, and Ta Jin had chosen the first 4 digits while Jun-seo had chosen the last 4. Based on Myung-guk's logs, Jae Kyung figures Myung-guk created the drugs, Jun-seo delivered it, and Jong-soo used the drugs. Ju-song wonders why Jun-seo switched roles and started a drug business with Ta Jin, and more importantly, now that Myung-guk and Jun-seo are dead, who is running the drug business? At that same moment, Sang Yue delivers some of the drugs for Chi-yeon to give to Jong-soo. Afterward, he calls Tai-jin to update him on the situation with CEO Yoon, so Tai-jin tells him to meet him in person to discuss. Meanwhile, Jong-soo gets news that a business group is willing to invest $500 million in his company. This means the mayor will finally be willing to do business with them, and they won't go bankrupt after all. Jong-soo meets with his father to break the news, so Chang-ho tells him he's done well. He then asks about Jong-soo's relationship with Tai-jin, which Jong-soo says is fine. Chang-ho reveals Tai-jin's intention to become an investor and warns Jong-soo to put a tail on Ta-jin. Meanwhile, Ji-yoon meets with Yoo Jin and comes clean about her affair with Ta-jin. She explains that she was lonely after her daughter died, and that's when Ta-jin approached her. One night, she returned home drunk, and Jun-seo asked her if the affair had started before or after their daughter died, but Ji-yoon simply said it didn't matter. That was 10 days before Jun-seo died. Back at the police station, Yoon-ho's wife is brought in for questioning. Jae Kyung tries to get through to her, but she remains tight-lipped till Ja Kyung points out that Jong-soo, Chi-yeon, and Ta-jin don't actually care about helping Yoon-ho. At this, she reveals that she went to meet Yoon-ho, and he never once asked how she or the kids were doing. All he cared about was Jong-soo and the others. She then gives up the address of the motel he's hiding in. The police rush to the motel and discover he's already checked out, but they spread out to check the surrounding motels. Yoon-ho watches them from one of the buildings and manages to sneak out before the police spot him. Meanwhile, Sang Yue is called to a meeting with Jong-soo and Chi-yeon. Jong-soo asks Sang Yue if he's the one who ratted them out to Jae Kyung. When Sang Yue admits it, he warns him never to try it again. Just then, Ta-jin shows up and says she has something important to discuss with the others, so they ask Sang Yue to leave. However, Sang Yue left his phone recording in his jacket. Ta-jin then informs the others that the police are looking for Yoon-ho and suggests they kill him. Chi-yeon immediately objects, but Ta-jin reminds him he's the one that got Myung-guk killed. At this, Jong-soo suggests they hold off till they're backed into a corner. Meanwhile, Yoon-ho is still on the run when he receives a recording of Ta-jin telling the others they need to kill him. After he receives a message claiming the proof that Ta-jin killed Jun-seo in his apartment. Yoon-ho heads toward the apartment, and on the way, he calls Chi-yeon and calls him a traitor for plotting with Ta-jin. He then reveals that Ta-jin has been manipulating both of them as he's sleeping with Ji-yoon behind their backs. At the same time, Jae Kyung discovers that Yoon-ho's cell phone has been turned on and is now heading toward Ji-yoon's apartment. He quickly tells the other officers, and they rush to Ji-yoon's building. Yoon-ho arrives at her apartment and Ji-yoon lets him in, but she quickly senses she's in danger when Yoon-ho accuses her of plotting to kill Jun-seo. By the time the police arrive, they find Ji-yoon bleeding out on the floor. Jae Kyung runs through the stairwell hoping to find Yoon-ho, but his withdrawal symptoms suddenly kick in and barely stop himself from taking the drugs. Back at the police station, Hyung-hwan suggests they talk to Dae-sung since Jae Kyung is always stealing their cases. There, Dae-sung tells them Jae Kyung must be really strong to survive the amount of the drug that was injected into him, unless he was already a drug addict before then. Later, Jae Kyung is at the hospital and the doctors tell him Ji-yoon will be just fine. Ta-jin shows up to ask about her, causing Ja Kyung to accuse him of sending Yoon-ho to kill Ji-yoon. Ta-jin denies it and punches Jae Kyung, who can barely stand at this point. Then Yoo Jin shows up and slaps some sense into Ta-jin. Later, Yoo Jin gets Jae Kyung some water and discovers the appetite suppressors aren't working anymore. She then suggests to Jae Kyung go home and rest, and she'll contact him later. Meanwhile, Jong-soo, Chi-yeon, and Ta-jin meet again, and Ta-jin informs them that Yoon-ho tried to kill Ji-yoon. At this, Chi-yeon reveals that Yoon-ho had called him earlier and sounded as if he heard a recording of their conversation. Chi-yeon then asks Ta-jin if he's been having an affair with Ji-yoon. Ta-jin admits it, but says he had nothing to do with Jun-seo's death. However, he insists that Yoon-ho needs to be taken care of. Just then, Yoon-ho calls Jun-soo and asks for his help. When Jun-soo refuses, Yoon-ho threatens to tell everyone that Jun-soo made him kill Myung-suk. Jun-soo then agrees to meet with Yoon-ho and says he'll text the location. When the call ends, he agrees to Tae-jin's suggestion and tasks Ji-yeon with the dirty work. Later, a car pulls up and Yoon-ho runs up to it, but when he enters, Ji-yeon strangles him from behind. When he wakes up, he finds Ji-yeon digging a shallow grave. Yoon-ho begs for his life, explaining that he only wanted to be a part of the group, so Ji-yeon decides to let him go but warns him never to pretend like he really died there that day. However, when Ji-yeon tries to leave, Yoon-ho begins to scream out their old-school creed, causing Ji-yeon to go back and finish the job. Later, a man passes by when he spots Ji-yeon with a shovel. Ji-yeon then tosses a bloody shoe in his direction, confirming the man's suspicions. Meanwhile, Yoo-jin goes to Jae-kyung's apartment and finds another package on the floor. Inside, she finds Jae-kyung in worse condition than before and struggles to decide what to do later. Jae-kyung wakes up and finds out Yoo-jin gave him the drug again. Jae-kyung then decides to check the box and finds a note telling him a port to go to in 2 days. Jae-kyung immediately calls Yeon-ju and informs her of the port to catch Jin-wook. At the same time, Sang-yu calls Jin-wook as the doctor and tells him to be at the port in 2 days. He then reveals his identity as Tae-jin, claiming he doesn't need to hide it anymore since Jin-wook is leaving town. Meanwhile, Jong-soo meets with the mayor again, and this time he agrees to work with the company. When Jong-soo tells his father the good news, Chang-ho tells Jang-soo he's proud of him and to remember that no one can replace him as his son, not even Tae-jin. On the other hand, Jae-kyung and Yoo-jin follow Sang-yu to a restaurant where he meets with Tae-jin. Yoo-jin stuffs a recording device in the window so they can listen. There, Tae-jin accuses Sang-yu of recording their conversation and sending it to Yoon-ho. He suspects Sang-yu is also recording their conversation and confirms his suspicion. Tae-jin then insists he didn't kill Jun-seo and warns him to stick to the original plan. After, Sang-yu heads to his car to leave, so Ja-kyung and Yoo-jin enter the car with him. There, Yoo-jin accuses him of making the drug and adds that Jun-seo only agreed to it so he could make enough money to treat his daughter in the US. After hearing this, Sang-yu takes them to the freezer storage unit, which has a secret door hidden inside. There, they discover the factory where the drugs are being manufactured. Sang-yu admits to drugging Jae-kyung just because he doesn't like him. This angers Jae-kyung, who tries to attack him, but Yoo-jin holds him off. Sang-yu reveals that Jun-seo was his friend first, but when Ja-kyung started hanging out with him, Jun-seo barely spoke to him anymore. Things got worse when Jun-seo became friends with Jong-soo and Tae-jin because they were only trying to use him. However, Sang-yu calls Jae-kyung the worst of them because he never forgave Jun-seo and couldn't see how much he was suffering. Yoo-jin asked Sang-yu how he was able to move Myung-guk's body from the freezer storage, so Sang-yu revealed that he had help from Ju-min. When they asked how he's involved, Sang-yu tells them they'll soon find out. Jae-kyung threatens to arrest Sang-yu, but Sang-yu points out that he doesn't have enough evidence to arrest Tae-jin for Jun-seo's death, so he begs for more time to prove it. Meanwhile, Tae-jin finds out he's been promoted to prosecutor of the Ministry of Justice. Angered, Tae-jin goes to meet with Chang-ho and informs him that he has always hated being a prosecutor and wanted to be a businessman. He reminded Chang-ho that he got the company to where it is and the company would be at risk without. Chang-ho responded by saying Tae-jin was their biggest risk since he was selling drugs behind their backs. He then insisted that Tae-jin wouldn't even be a human without him and stormed off. Meanwhile, Shi-yeon receives pictures from the man tailing Tae-jin and discovers that Sang-yu met with Jae-kyung and Yoo-jin. At the same time, the police get a tip from the man who saw Chi-yeon in the woods and finally discover Yoon-ho's body. Later, Chi-yeon asks Sang-yu to deliver more drugs while Jong-soo comes over to celebrate the deal with the mayor. However, when Tae-jin arrives, he finds Sang-yu bleeding on the floor while Jong-soo attacks Tae-jin for selling drugs behind his back. Tae-jin admits to selling the drugs and explains that he was never with Jong-soo for the friendship. Angered, Jong-soo plans to feed Tae-jin and Sang-yu the drugs too, so he sends Chi-yeon to get them. However, Sang-yu knocks Jong-soo out and escapes with Tae-jin, who tells him to delete any evidence of their work and go abroad. The next day, Jae-kyung meets with Ju-song and Yoo-jin, and they all head to the address where Jun-seo has been sending his pension. When they arrive, they meet Ju-min and an old woman who turns out to be Kyung-tae's mother. When they head inside, Yoo-min explains that he was Kyung-tae's friend and the one who told Jun-seo how Kyung-tae died. He then hands them a flash drive from Jun-seo, and when they watch it, they find footage of Yoon-ho taking Myung-guk to the freezer storage with Chi-yeon. Yoo-min then reveals that 20 years ago, the boys had accidentally started the fire and left Kyung-tae to die. However, Jong-soo returned to look for his name tag, and when he discovered Kyung-tae was still alive, he bludgeoned him with a stick till he died. After this, the trio heads to the seaside to process what they just heard. There, they remember the last time they were near the sea was when they went to visit Jun-seo's mother during summer break. It was that night that Jun-seo told Jae-kyung the story of what happened to Kyung-tae, and Jae-kyung went to report to the police. Jin also admits that she had overheard their entire conversation and still had no courage to speak up when Ja Kyung got kicked out of school for lying. Meanwhile, Jin leads a raid on the freezer storage facility and plans to pin the drug-making factory on Jong-soo. When Jong-soo hears the news, he rushes to his father, who asks what Jong-soo did to anger Jin. Jong-soo reveals that he discovered Jin's secret drug operation, but Chang-ho scolds him for making it a big deal. Later, Chang-ho and Jong-soo meet with Jin to ask what he wants. Jin tells Chang-ho to blame the drug scandal on Jong-soo in exchange for leaving the company unscathed. Jin then calls the mayor and asks Chang-ho to choose between the company and his son, so Chang-ho chooses the company. Jin then blackmails the mayor with illicit photos of him with underage girls, so the mayor has no choice but to continue the deal. Jin then gets his men to arrest Jong-soo and drag him away. Meanwhile, Jae-kyung, Yeon-ju, and Chang-soo prepare to intercept Jin-wook's plan to flee the country. Jae-kyung suddenly gets a call from his colleague and sends the car footage of Chang-soo on the night he drove Gi-sung. After reviewing the footage, Jae-kyung confronts Chang-soo with the video and they arrest him on the spot. Yeon-ju and Jae-kyung carry on with the plan at the port, so Yeon-ju goes undercover to meet with Jin-wook and pretend like she's trying to flee the country too. However, Jae-kyung gets a tip that their cover has been blown, so some men try to attack Yeon-ju. When Jae-kyung begins to shoot at them, the men get in a car and drive off, so Jae-kyung chases after them and calls for backup. Jin-wook manages to get on a boat which takes off, so Jae-kyung runs to a spot on the shore and shoots at him, causing the boat rider to surrender. However, when reinforcements show up, Hyung-hwan places Jae-kyung under arrest for mismanagement of drugs. Later at the station, Yeon-ju pulls Jae-kyung to the side and asks how he got addicted to the drugs. Jae-kyung tells her the truth, so she informs him that he'll be interrogated by the chief of police, so he needs to say he was first exposed to drugs at the shopping mall. After, Jae-kyung goes to speak to Chang-soo and asks why he did all these things. Chang-soo tries to justify his actions, but Jae-kyung reminds him there's no justification for taking a life. Chang-soo warns that he can send him to jail with just one testimony, but Jae-kyung simply says he feels embarrassed by him. Meanwhile, Yoo-jin receives a flash drive from Sang-yu containing pictures of the mayor. She then meets with Sang-yu and assures him that even though she'll write the story, she isn't doing it for him or Jun-seo. Back at the station, the chief of police meets with Jae-kyung and all the other officers involved to find out the truth. Jae-kyung admits he was addicted to the drug, but Chang-soo speaks up and says he was the one that drugged Jae-kyung in the first place. He claims he hired CEO Yoon to drug him because Jae-kyung was onto him and submits footage of himself putting the drug in Jae-kyung's mouth at the station. Jae-kyung begs Chang-soo to tell the truth, but Chang-soo sticks to his story and is taken away. Meanwhile, a realtor meets with Yoo-jin and hands her a package from Jun-seo. When Yoo-jin looks inside, she finds a map of the construction site and discovers something. She then calls Jae-kyung and reveals that the spot Jun-seo chose at the construction site is where Kyung-tae's house used to be. After, Chi-yeon goes to pay his respects at Yoon-ho's funeral. Yoon-ho tells Chi-yeon to convince Ta-jin to take care of her and the kids, but when Chi-yeon tries to leave, the police show up and arrest him for Yoon-ho's murder. When Yoon-ho's wife sees this, she breaks down and cries. Later, Sang-yu and Jae-kyung meet with Ta-jin, so they all lock their phones in a safe so no one can record it. Jae-kyung asks Ta-jin if he killed Jun-seo, but he continues to deny it. He explains that Jun-seo needed money for his daughter's treatment and went to Jong-soo for help, but Jong-soo refused to help him. That's when Ta-jin pitched the idea for the drug dealing business, which Jun-seo agreed to. However, when Ta-jin insists that it doesn't prove that he murdered Jun-seo, Jae-kyung reveals that Jun-seo was wearing his shoes when he fell. Upon hearing this, Ta-jin says that wasn't part of his plan and finally admits to plotting to kill Jun-seo. However, Ta-jin says it would be their word against his since they had no evidence. He insists that Jun-seo's life was pathetic and asks what the big deal is. At this, Sang-yu shoots Tae-jin in the head to get revenge for Jun-seo. 1 month later, Jae-kyung visits Sang-yu in prison and tells him that he got revenge for himself, not for Jun-seo. Sang-yu tells him not to visit again, but before he leaves, he tells Jae-kyung Ta-jin's half of the passcode to the money. Later, Jae-kyung meets with Ju-song and Yoo-jin, who is now a big-time reporter for the stories she wrote about the mayor. There, Jae-kyung gets a call stating that the autopsy results on Jun-seo have been revealed. Jae-kyung went down to the station where he found Chang-ho's assistant in custody. Yeon-ju informed him that the assistant's DNA was found on Jun-seo's body, and he confessed to killing Jun-seo according to Ta-jin's plans. After this, Jae-kyung goes to see Chang-ho and removes his phone to show he wasn't recording the conversation. He then accuses Chang-ho of planning a part of the murder since his assistant wouldn't easily follow Ta-jin's plans without Chang-ho's approval. Chang Ho denies it at first, until Jia Kyung points out that Junse's shoes were found on the ninth floor and Tai Jin had mentioned it wasn't part of the plan. Chang Ho cracks under the pressure and admits to playing a role. That's when Jia Kyung reveals that he was actually recording with another device and places him under arrest. In the end, Jae Kyung, Yoo Jin, and Ju Song head to the beach to relive the old times they have as kids. Ju Song reminds them that on the day they visited Junse, they all agreed to make it Friendship Day. He then points out that Ju Song had reminded him of Friendship Day the last time he came to visit him. Suddenly, they all realize that was the same day he visited all of them. Jae Kyung asks Yoo Jin if she remembers the website where the money was kept, and she does. They head to the site, and Jae Kyung uses the numbers Sang Yu gave him. Next, they input the friendship date as the last four numbers, and they all scream in shock when they see what's inside.